following up on research I've been doing for 20 years, but specifically a wave of research that started with 9/11. In December of 2008, and then again in May of 2009, I did national surveys on consumer sentiment because my belief was sentiment has changed. Before, I spent a lot of time on how people's behavior and interests change because for 15 years prior to that, the American mindset was one of things are generally okay and growing, and we have opportunities. And I think we hit the brakes in a big way. And in fact, I would say July 1st of 2008 is when we hit the brakes, and there's a lot of data that support that. And now we're in a position where we are feeling like we may not have access to things, and we're particularly ticked off at companies who wasted our money, and sentiment comes in here. Find anything that promotes the opportunities of the wealthy to be outrageous, disdainful, to the point of disgusting. And that's a major change in the way Americans feel. So in August of 2009, I conducted two separate national studies with two different companies, ICR, who is working with me on a monthly basis through their social science research solutions, and TNS with the ESPN Sports Poll, collecting mostly the same questions in each, but with Sports Poll looking at what the impact of economy is on sports fans, and with ICR largely looking at impact on home technology and media use, which is really fascinating. And the study was designed to look at the impact of discretionary spending and how that was changing, how they felt about things and what they were doing. No way I'm going to be able to share the results of this and still haven't finished completely, but I want to give you the top line now. You're watching this because probably somebody, even me, said you might be interested in the top line. 2/3 of Americans in August, and the beauty of this is having two completely separate studies. I know that these are pretty good, really good, because they got the same results, within 5% of each other. 2/3 of Americans say they have less money to spend after all the bills are paid than they had last year. 40% said they had much less. Well, so I asked, has the economy had any impact on how much you enjoy sports? And about 38% said, yeah, I enjoy sports less because of the economy. About 20% said, I enjoy sports more. So there is a group who is saying sports is more part of the relief to this process, but there's another group who's saying it's less good, and in fact is hurt. And then I asked, well, how likely is this to persist? As in, will this change in your feeling about sports last forever, end when the economy is no longer troubled, linger for a while when the economy is no longer troubled, and go away? 80% of those who answered that question said it was going to persist. But here's where it gets interesting. By and large, they're bigger sports fans and have a more positive disposition about life. And the more negative you were about the economy, the more likely you were to say that your feelings were going to go away as soon as the troubles lifted. Now that's a complex thing, and I can't handle it here on the tape, but I'm going to add to the complexity where the report hopefully will add to the clarity. I wondered if the perceptions about whether they enjoy sports more or less was related to discretionary spending, and by and large it's not. If you have less, you are as likely to say you like sports more or less as you did if you had more. However, income was a direct predictor. The less income you have, the more likely you are to say the economy is decreasing my interest in sports. Set that aside, the next one. After the Depression, during the Depression, there were 2 years when Americans spent more than they earned. The only 2 years since before the Depression when that was true. After the Depression, Americans went saving crazy. There was a period before 1947 where 25% of everything they earned was tucked away. My mother-in-law, bless her heart, one day I was in the kitchen with her, she took a bite out of a cookie and put the rest of the cookie on an upper shelf. And I said, Mom, what are you doing? She said, oh, Richie, you never know. She was a depression woman. She understood that, you know, you got to save. Her life was forever changed. This was in the 80s, and she is still doing it. We're on the same pattern now. Coming into 2007, we had 4 years where we were bouncing on no savings. And I can't tell you how scary that is. That's really bad news. And as soon as this thing hit, starting in 2008, July, we started tucking money away. We're squirreling away stuff because we're expecting hard times. All right, so maybe some indicators say the recession is over. We already know that unemployment's going to get worse. What's more important is you can't ignore the fact that Americans are looking at this and saying this is a long-haul proposition. And the way they feel is likely to stay that way for a long time. And the challenge is they're not, here's a great one. They're saying companies should not be as invested in sports marketing as once they were. Okay, 50% say do less or get out altogether. And then when we say, but how about community? Should companies be invested in community? 70% of all Americans say companies should be more invested. 30-some% saying much more invested than they were. Now that's interesting. Then we asked them on their discretionary spending. After the money is, after you paid your bills, how likely are you to spend money on sports? 67% said not at all likely, while 50% said they were very likely to spend on gathering with family and friends. Well, there's a whole lot more to this. But I guess the bottom line I want to say here is that we're seeing ground-changing, seismic shifts in how people are feeling that are not going to go away. And one of the most powerful things out of the study to me is, on one side, Americans are saying we need companies to invest in community gathering, and we'll spend money on that, very likely. On the other side, they're saying don't spend money so much on sports, and I'm not spending on sports. You know what I'm struggling with here? Unless you're playing in the game, isn't sports all about the gathering of family and friends? At least that's what it used to be. There's a key clue to the seismic shifts we're seeing. We've gotten so focused on the speed of technological advancement and profiting from it, we've lost that core focus on meaningful things like gathering. And Americans they're not telling us, they're yelling at us. We need more support for gathering together. And right now, the sports industry isn't getting it. The August studies give some sobering light to this, and we'll be continuing to study this on a monthly basis going forward.